The lieutenant emptied her folder onto the wet pavement and watched the papers slide into a puddle, and when she reached for them on her hands and knees, he put his boot down flat on the page closest to her fingers and said, loud enough for the whole front of the station to hear, that nobody was coming for her, that she could kneel there until dark, and nobody on God's earth was coming. 3 officers stood in the doorway behind him. None of them moved. A young man across the lot had his phone up and his thumb already on the red circle. The old woman stayed down on the cold concrete with her cane just out of reach, and did not cry, and did not beg. She only looked past the lieutenant's shoulder toward the road, the way a person looks when she knows something the man standing over her does not.
Let me take you back to the morning before any of this, so you understand who was on that ground. Her name was Marina Tillman, and at 68, she still woke before the birds. She lived in a narrow brick house on Pendergrass Street, in a town small enough that the one traffic light blinked yellow after 9 at night. The house smelled of percolated coffee and the lemon oil she rubbed into the dining table every Sunday, a habit left over from 40 years of teaching second grade, where everything had to be wiped and ready before children arrived. She had retired 6 years ago. She had not stopped working a single day since. That fall, she ran a thing the neighborhood called the After Bell, though it had no sign and no budget. It was this. At 3 o'clock, she drove a 15-year-old activity bus, donated and barely running, down to the elementary school and gathered up the children whose mothers worked second shift at the chicken plant or cleaned offices downtown until 8, and she brought them to the basement of Greater Hope, where she fed them and made them do their homework before they were allowed to touch a single thing that was fun. She had 31 children on her list. She knew every one of their middle names and every one of their fears. The bus mattered more than anything she owned. Without it, the children walked, and the walk home went past the loading docks behind the plant and across the state road where the trucks came off the highway too fast. 2 years back, a girl from the plant, 17, had been clipped on that road, walking home in the dark, and had spent a month learning to use her left hand again. Marina had decided the day she heard about it that no child on her list would ever make that walk. The bus was how she kept that promise. The bus was the promise. Her mornings had a rhythm you could set a watch to. She let the screen door clap twice because the spring was loose and she liked the sound. She watered the fern on the porch even in October, talking to it low. She ate half a grapefruit standing at the counter and saved the other half for the boy next door, Domingo, 19, who cut her grass and could not seem to feed himself. She kept her late husband's pocket knife in the drawer by the sink and touched the handle of it some mornings without taking it out, the way you touch a door frame in a house you grew up in. Her husband had been Walter Tillman, a quiet man who had run an engine repair shop 2 streets over until his heart gave out 4 winters ago. People still brought her zucchini they did not need to give away, just so they could sit on her porch and say his name out loud. She let them. She knew the porch did as much work as the basement of the church did. And there was the other thing about her mornings. The thing she did not talk about, even to the fern. She had a son. His name was Andres, and he was a major in the United States Army, and she had not had a real letter from him in 11 weeks because of where he was and what he did, which he never named and she never asked. On the refrigerator behind a magnet shaped like a peach was a photograph of him at his last promotion, his hand on his cover, his eyes the same as his father's. She did not call him. You did not call a man like that and tie up his mind with a town this small. She wrote him. She told him about the children and the grapefruit and the fern, and never once in 3 years about anything that had gone wrong, because she had decided long ago that her boy carried enough weight for 10 men, and she would not add a feather to it. So when the trouble started, she handled it the way she handled everything. Alone. The trouble was the bus. On a Tuesday in late September, A tow truck came while the children were at their tables in the basement and hauled the after-bell bus out of the church lot. The notice, taped to the door, said the vehicle had been impounded for an expired commercial inspection and improper registration of a passenger transport vehicle. Marina read it 4 times. The inspection was not expired. She had the sticker. She had the paperwork in a green folder she kept in the glove box. Except the glove box was now behind a chain-link fence at the city impound lot. And the bus with it. She did what a careful person does. She gathered everything. The title, the donation letter from the man who had given her the bus, the inspection record with the date plain on it, the insurance binder, a letter from the pastor, 2 years of mileage logs in her own handwriting. She put it all in a fresh manila folder inside a second folder because Walter had taught her that the world respects a person who comes with 2 folders. She ironed her good cardigan. She practiced what she would say so it would come out calm. Then she walked down to the city police station because the impound was run through their office, and the citation had an officer's badge number on the bottom, and she meant to clear it up the way reasonable people clear things up, with documents and good manners and the truth. That was her first mistake, if you can call the truth a mistake. She believed the building would help her. It was a low brick building with a flag out front and 3 steps up to glass doors, and there were officers near the entrance when she came up the walk with her cane in one hand and her 2 folders pressed to her chest with the other. The man who stepped into her path wore lieutenant's bars and had a face gone red at the cheeks from either the cold or his nature. His name, which she would learn before the hour was out, was Pittman. Lieutenant Roy Pittman. "Help you," he said. It was not a question. "Good afternoon," Marina said. "I'm here about a vehicle that was towed by mistake. I have the paperwork showing the inspection's current. I just need to speak with whoever can release it." "Vehicle's impounded. You can't just walk up here. There's a process." "I understand there's a process. I'm trying to follow it. The citation lists this office. I have the inspection sticker record right here." She shifted the folder to open it. "Ma'am, you need to step back off the walk." His voice climbed a notch, and 2 of the officers by the door turned to watch, the way men turn to watch a thing they are glad is not happening to them. "We've got people coming and going. You're blocking the entrance." She was not blocking the entrance. She was standing to the side of it on a public walk, holding a folder. But she stepped back because she was 68 and he had a gun and bars on his collar, and stepping back had kept her alive in this town for a long time. "I'll wait wherever you'd like," she said. "I only need a few minutes with the right person." "There's nobody for you to see today. Then I'll come back tomorrow. Could I just leave a copy of the inspection record so someone can—" "You're not leaving anything. You're leaving, period." He was enjoying it now. You could see it settle into his shoulders, the small pleasure of a man who has found, in the middle of a dull afternoon, a person he is allowed to push. That is the first thing to understand about Roy Pittman. The pushing was not a means to an end. The pushing was the end. She held her ground one more beat, not out of defiance, but out of confusion. The honest confusion of a woman who had spent her whole life believing that if you were polite, and you were right, and you had your papers in order, the world would eventually do the decent thing. That belief was about to cost her. She did not leave. Instead, she stood very still and did a small thing he did not notice because his eyes were on her face. She slid her phone out of her cardigan pocket, the phone her daughter-in-law had set up for her, and she pressed her thumb to the side button twice, which her granddaughter had once shown her would start the voice recorder without unlocking the screen. She did not lift it. She let it lie flat against the manila folder, the little microphone hole pointed up at the gray sky and at the lieutenant's mouth. She did not know yet what she would do with it. She only knew, from 40 years of watching how people behaved when they thought no one would ever hear them, that a man like this should be recorded. Now you know it is running. He does not. "Lieutenant," she said, keeping her voice low and even. "I taught school in this town for 40 years. I expect I taught your officers their letters. I'm not here to make trouble. I'm here for one bus that takes 31 children home so they don't walk the state road in the dark.
That's all this is. For a half second, something moved behind his eyes. Then it shut the way a door shuts. 31 kids, he said. Maybe you shouldn't be hauling 31 kids around in a bus that can't pass inspection.
It passed. I have.
I don't care what's in your little folder. And he reached out and tapped the top folder with 2 fingers, not hard, just enough to make the papers slide, just enough to show her he could. Nobody back there is going to read it. Nobody's going to release that bus to you. You hear me? You can stand out here all day. Nobody's coming. There it was the first time. Nobody's coming. She would hear it 3 more times before the afternoon was done, and each time it would mean something larger. She bent slow to gather the 2 pages that had slid loose, and as she bent, her cane shifted on the damp walk, and she had to put a hand down to steady herself. And from the doorway, one of the officers, a young woman with her hair pinned tight under her cap, took half a step forward as if to help, and then stopped herself and stepped back into the doorway. Marina saw it. She filed it away. She had spent her life watching which children would help and which would freeze, and she knew the difference between a cruel person and a frightened one. The young officer was frightened. The lieutenant was something else. That young officer's name was Brenna Dabney, and you should hold on to her, because what she does later will cost her more than any uniform is worth. Marina got her papers, and got upright and faced him. I'd like your name and badge number, please. It was the wrong thing to ask, or the right thing asked of the wrong man. His face went a shade past red. You want my badge number. He said it like she had spit on the flag. You're going to come up to my station and put your hands on me and demand my badge number. I didn't put my... You're recording me. His eyes had dropped to the phone lying flat on the folder, and the little red bar across the top of her screen had given it away. Are you recording me on my own steps? And here is where the afternoon turned from ugly to dangerous, and where the young man across the lot, Domingo the boy, who could not feed himself, but who had a steady hand, raised his phone and started his own recording, because he had come out of the corner store with a soda and seen an old woman he knew, a woman who saved him half a grapefruit every morning, being cornered by a man in a uniform. So now there are 2 cameras. She has one she cannot lift. He has one he does not know about. Keep both of them in your mind. Sir, Marina said, and her voice did not shake, though her knee was bad from the kneeling and the cold had gotten into her hands. In this state, I'm permitted to record a public official performing public duties in a public place. I taught civics to 2nd graders. I know that much. It was true. It was also, to a man like Pittman, an act of war. He stepped in close. Closer than any decent man stands to a stranger. Close enough that she could smell the coffee on him. And he said, Give me the phone. No, sir. Hand it over, or I'll take it as evidence. Evidence of what? I haven't done anything. Resisting, obstruction, trespassing on a municipal facility. You want me to keep going? He held out his hand, palm up, fingers curling. The phone. She held the folders to her chest, with the phone trapped between them and her cardigan, both hands occupied. And she shook her head once, slow, and he shoved her. It was not a punch. The story is not going to show you a punch. It was a flat hand to the upper chest, a shove the way a man shoves a door he is annoyed with. And it was enough. Her bad knee was already half bent, and her cane was in her hand and not under her, and she went down sideways onto the concrete, hip first, then shoulder, the folders flying open. 2 years of mileage logs and a donation letter and an inspection record, fanning out across the wet walk, and her cane clattering away from her toward the steps. The boy across the lot said out loud, "Oh my God." And you can hear it on the video clear. The moment a 19-year-old understood that the thing he was filming was real. The 3 officers in the doorway did not move. Marina lay on the concrete, and the cold came up through her cardigan and into her hip. And she did the thing she had taught 30 years of children to do when they were hurt and scared and surrounded. She breathed.
She found the sky. She did not look at the man standing over her. She looked at the gray clouds, and she breathed. And she did not give him her fear. Pittman stood over her and looked down, and put his boot flat on the inspection record, the one page that proved the whole thing was a lie, and he ground it half an inch into the puddle, and he said it again slower, so she would understand it was not about today. Nobody's coming for you. Look around. You see anybody coming? She looked. She looked at the 3 officers in the doorway who were studying the middle distance. She looked at the boy with the phone who was shaking now but did not lower it. She looked at the road behind the lieutenant, the road that came in off the highway, the road her son would come down if her son were the kind of man who came when he was needed, which he was, which she had raised him to be, but which she had never once asked him to be on her own behalf. And then she did a thing that, when you understand it, will sit in your chest for a long time. She did not pray for justice. She did not pray for the lieutenant to be struck down, or for the officers in the doorway to grow a conscience. On the cold concrete with a stranger's boot on the proof of her innocence, Marina Tillman closed her eyes and prayed one small, selfish prayer. The only one she had left. She prayed her son would answer the message, because 40 minutes earlier, in the long quiet after the lieutenant first told her nobody was coming, she had done the second small thing he did not see. She had typed 11 words into her phone and sent them to a number she had promised herself she would never use for anything less than the end of the world.
Andres, come to the city police station on 4th, now!
Mama! She had never sent him a message like that in his life. In 11 years of letters, she had never once asked him for a single thing. He would know the instant he read it that the sky had fallen, because his mother did not call out. His mother caught the truck door so it would not slam. His mother saved half a grapefruit. His mother did not ask. She did not know if the message had even gone through. The bars on her phone were thin out here. She did not know if he was somewhere he could read it, or somewhere he could not, or somewhere they did not let him have a phone at all. She had sent it into the dark, the way you throw a rope into a flood, not knowing if there is a hand out there to catch it. So she lay on the ground and prayed not for the system to save her, but for the rope to be caught. Let me tell you what was happening to that message while she lay there, because it matters. The message had gone through. It had crossed 3 states and a satellite, and landed on a phone in a duffel bag in the cargo hold of a transport that had touched down 90 minutes earlier at an airfield 200 miles away, carrying a major named Andres Tillman home on the first leave he had taken in 2 years. A leave he had not told his mother about because he had wanted to surprise her, to walk up the steps of the brick house on Pendergrass Street and catch the screen door before it could clap twice and see her face. He had a rental car already. He was an hour and 40 minutes out on the interstate, his cover on the passenger seat and a paper sack of her favorite pralines on the dash, when he stopped for gas and pulled the phone from the bag and saw 11 words from a woman who had never in his life asked him to come. He did not finish pumping the gas, but he was still an hour and 40 minutes away, and a great deal can happen to an old woman on a cold sidewalk in an hour and 40 minutes. So let us go back to her, and to the lieutenant, and to the thing that happened next, which made it worse before anyone could make it better. While she was still on the ground, a second officer came down the steps. This was a sergeant, older with a gut that strained his belt, named Curtis Grist. And you might think for a moment that an older man, a senior man, had come to put a stop to it. He had not. He came down the steps, looked at the woman on the ground and the papers in the puddle, looked at the boy with the phone, and said to the boy, "You need to shut that off and move along. This is a police matter."
"She's on the ground,"
Domingo said. His voice was high.
"He pushed her. She's like 70. She's on the ground, man."
"This is a police matter, and you're interfering with it. Move along, or you're next."
Grist took a step toward the boy, and the boy took a step back but did not stop filming. And that small act of a frightened 19-year-old refusing to lower his phone is the reason any of what follows could happen at all. Remember him, too.
Grist turned back to Pittman, lowered his voice, the way men do when they think the public can't hear. Except the public could hear because a phone lying flat on a manila folder 18 inches away was catching every word.
Roy, what is this?
Lady won't leave. Got aggressive. Tried to record me, wouldn't give up the phone.
She tried to record you.
On the steps. Put her hands near me.
Grist looked down at Marina, who had managed to get herself up onto one hip and was reaching slow for her cane. He looked at her cardigan and her gray hair come loose from its pins and her papers in the water. Something passed over his face, some old animal calculation, and what he decided was not to help her. What he decided was that the easiest thing, the thing that protected Roy and protected the doorway full of officers and protected the building and the badge and the long, quiet afternoon, was to make her the problem and make her go away.
"Ma'am, you're going to need to leave the premises," Grist said. "You can come back during business hours and file a complaint through the proper channel."
"This is business hours," Marina said from the ground. "It's 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday."
It was. And you could hear on both recordings the exact moment that simple, true sentence landed, the moment 2 grown men in uniform realized that the old woman on the ground was not confused and was not going to be confused, that her mind was a clean blade, and that the only way to win was to stop pretending it was about anything reasonable at all. So Pittman stopped pretending.
"Call a tow," he said to Grist.
For what?
"Her car." Pittman gestured at the curb where Marina's old sedan sat legally parked at a meter she had fed. "Abandoned. Improperly parked, I don't care. Call a tow and let's be done with this."
And there it was, the thing that turned the whole afternoon from one cruel man's bad temper into something with a shape. Because a tow on a legally parked car at a fed meter is not temper, it is policy. It is a man who knows the machine well enough to feed a person into it. Marina understood it in that instant, lying on the ground, and so should you. This was not the first time Roy Pittman had used the impound lot and the tow company and the citation book as a way to make a person's life small. He had done it before. He knew exactly which levers made a poor person poorer and a powerless person more powerless. He had a system, and the system had a sound, and the sound was a flatbed's diesel turning into the lot. But before the tow could come, the afternoon turned a different way because of the boy and his phone. Domingo, still filming, still shaking, did the bravest thing a frightened 19-year-old can do. He talked. He narrated, loud for the camera, the way kids who have grown up watching these videos know to do.
"It's 214 on 4th Street, outside the police station. This officer just pushed an old lady down. She's got a cane. Her name's Miss Marina. She teaches the kids, she runs the bus. There's a sergeant. They're calling a tow on her car. It's parked legal. I can see the meter. It's got time on it."
"Son, I told you." Grist started toward him. "I'm on a public sidewalk, and I'm allowed to film y'all." "She just told you that, and she's right. I looked it up too." Domingo backed up to the edge of the lot near the road. Phone up, voice cracking but not stopping.
"Y'all come push me too, then. Push me on camera. Go ahead."
They did not push him. That is the thing about men like Pittman and Grist. They will shove a 68-year-old woman because they have run the math and decided she costs nothing. They will not shove a 19-year-old with a steady phone and a loud mouth and a road full of witnesses behind him, because that math comes out different. The cruelty was never blind rage. It was always arithmetic. And while they stood in that frozen second, deciding whether the boy was worth the trouble, the young officer in the doorway, Brenna Dabney, came down 2 steps.
"Lieutenant," she said, "I can take her complaint. I'll process it. Get her off the
I'll handle it inside. Her voice was careful, every word chosen to sound like she was helping him and not the woman. Let me just get her name and the vehicle, and we'll be done. No tow, no nothing, just paper.
It was a lifeline thrown sideways, dressed up as obedience, so the men would accept it. Marina on the ground recognized exactly what the young woman was doing, because Marina had spent 40 years teaching small, frightened people to do brave things in language that would not get them hit. Pittman looked at Dabney. For one moment, the whole thing hung in the balance, and you listening do not know which way it falls, because you have learned by now that this story does not let the right thing win just because it is the right thing. It fell the wrong way. You don't take anything, Pittman told Dabney flat, and there was a warning under it that had nothing to do with the old woman, and everything to do with the young officer's future in that building. Get back inside. You don't know what you're stepping in. Dabney stopped on the step. Her jaw worked. She looked at Marina on the ground, and Marina, who could not stand, and could not help her, and could not even reach her own cane, did the only thing she could. She gave the young woman the smallest shake of her head. Don't. Not for me. Not yet. Don't burn yourself for this. And the young officer, after a long second, stepped back up into the doorway, and her stepping back was the worst thing that had happened all afternoon. Worse than the shove, because the shove was a stranger's cruelty, and the step back was a good person being taught in real time that the building would punish her for decency. Hold on to that step back. It does not stay the last word. Now I am going to tell you the thing Marina did not know, yet the thing that turned a bad afternoon into a reckoning. And I am going to tell it to you the way she would learn it later, in pieces, because that is how the truth came. The reason Roy Pittman knew the impound lot and the tow company and the citation books so well was that he had been running this play for years, and the after-bell bus was not the first vehicle he had taken from a person who could not fight back. 11 months earlier, he had impounded a work van belonging to a man named Domingo Cruz, the boy's uncle, a man who fixed appliances out of that van, on a citation that a magistrate had thrown out 3 weeks later. By then, the man had lost a month of jobs and could not make the lot fee, and the van was sold at auction, and the man moved to his sister's 2 counties over. And that is why the boy, Domingo, knew exactly what he was looking at when he saw the flatbed coming. He had seen what it did to his uncle. He had decided 11 months ago that the next time he saw it, he would not look away. That is the first thread. Here is the second, and it is the one that made Marina, when she finally heard it, have to sit down. The girl from the chicken plant. The 17-year-old who had been clipped on the state road 2 years before, the one whose injury had made Marina swear no child of hers would ever walk that road in the dark. That girl had a younger brother on Marina's list, and the reason the family had no car to drive her, the reason she was walking that road in the dark at 17, was that their car had been impounded 8 months before the accident, on a citation written by the same Lieutenant Roy Pittman, and the family had not been able to get it back. And so the girl walked. Sit with that. The bus existed because a child got hurt. The child got hurt because she had to walk. She had to walk because Roy Pittman took her family's car, and now Roy Pittman was taking the bus. It was not a coincidence. It was not even cruelty. Not exactly. It was a system. A small, ugly, local system in which one man had learned that the easiest way to feel large was to make the smallest people in town smaller. And the building behind him had learned that the easiest way to have a quiet afternoon was to let him. The complaints existed. Domingo Cruz's uncle had filed one. The chicken plant family had filed one. They sat in a drawer in that building, 3 of them, 4 of them going gray, because the proper channel ran through the very men who needed them never to be read. And one more complaint sat in that drawer, the one that mattered most, the one Marina did not know about until the very end. And I will save it for where it belongs, because it is the thing that turned a pattern into a crime. For now, come back to the sidewalk where the flatbed has been called, and an old woman is on the ground, and her son is an hour out and getting closer. The tow truck took 22 minutes to arrive. Marina knew because she counted, lying and then sitting on the cold walk, refusing the one chair Brenna Dabney tried twice to bring out and was twice told to leave inside. She counted because counting kept her steady, the way she had taught children to count when the thunder came. In those 22 minutes, Roy Pittman went inside, satisfied, leaving Grist to supervise the indignity. And that was Pittman's mistake, because while he was inside warming his hands, the afternoon kept being recorded by the boy and by the phone on the folder, and the Sergeant Grist, thinking the boss had handled it, said a number of things into the cold air that he would later wish very much he had not said. He said watching the flatbed back up to Marina's sedan, "Should have just left when she was told. They never just leave." He said when Domingo called out, asking why they were towing a legally parked car, "Because we can." 3 words. Because we can. On 2 cameras time-stamped with an elderly woman sitting on the ground in the background. He said when Dabney came out a 3rd time with the chair and her face set, "Brenna, I swear to God, take that chair back inside or you can explain to the lieutenant why you're so worried about this particular individual." And Dabney stood there with the folding chair in her hands, in front of the boy's camera, and made a choice. She set the chair down next to Marina. "Sit, ma'am," she said quietly. "Please, the ground's too cold." It was a folding chair. It was nothing. It was everything. It was a young officer with a mortgage and a probationary status, and a sergeant glaring a hole in her back, setting down a chair for an old woman on camera against a direct order. And you could hear Grist behind her say low, "You just made a mistake." And you could hear Dabney say, not low, clear for the camera, "She's 68 years old and she's on the ground. Somebody had to." That was the crack. One person at real cost breaking the silence. It did not fix anything. The bus was still impounded. The sedan was going up on the flatbed. Marina was still hurt and cold and humiliated in front of her whole small world. But the silence had a crack in it now. And through cracks, eventually, everything comes. Marina sat in the chair. She looked up at the young officer and said so quiet, only Dabney heard it, "Thank you, baby. Now you go stand by the boy with the phone. Stand where he can see you, you understand me? Let it see your face." And Dabney, who did not fully understand but trusted the old teacher's voice, the way you trust a voice that taught half the town its letters, walked over and stood near Domingo in frame her badge and her face plain in the afternoon light. An officer of that department standing visibly with the woman on the ground. Marina had just made the single most important move of the afternoon, and she had made it from a folding chair with 11 quiet words, the way she had run a classroom of 30 for 40 years. She did not need to shout. She needed the camera to see a uniform on the right side. Now it had. The flatbed lifted her sedan. The hydraulics whined, and the old car tilted up and back, and inside the glove box, useless behind a chain-link future, sat nothing. Because the bus paperwork had never been in the sedan, it had been in her hands, in the folders, now drying in the cold on the public walk. She had brought everything. She had done everything right, and the world was taking her car anyway, in front of her, because a man had decided in the morning that he wanted to feel large. It was at the lowest point of the afternoon, with the sedan chained and rising, and Pittman come back out onto the steps to watch, hands on his belt, that her phone, lying on the folder in her lap, now lit up. One word, coming. She did not let her face change. 40 years of not letting your face change in front of children who needed you to be calm will do that. She turned the phone over against her cardigan so the screen would not show, and she folded her hands on top of it, and she looked up at Roy Pittman on the steps, and for the first time all afternoon,
She let herself smile just a little, just at the corners. The smile of a woman who has thrown a rope into a flood and felt at last a hand close around it.
Pittman saw the smile and did not understand it, and it bothered him.
Something funny.
No, sir,
Marina said.
I'm just resting in this nice chair.
Bus is gone. Car's gone. You can walk home now. Nobody's coming to help you carry your papers. 3 times now. He could not stop saying it. It had become a kind of song for him.
No, sir,
Marina said.
I don't expect they will.
And she settled in the folding chair to wait. Because the thing about a rope caught in a flood is that the current is still fast, and the hand on the other end is still far away. And there was nothing to do now but hold on and not let go of her dignity, which was the only thing left that was hers, and that no flatbed could lift. The wait was 31 minutes. I will not stretch them because she did not. She sat. The boy filmed. Dabney stood in frame and took her quiet punishment of glares. Grist supervised the flatbed's paperwork. Pittman came in and out of the warmth, drawn back each time by the puzzle of the old woman who would not leave, and would not cry, and would not stop almost smiling. Twice more cars slowed on 4th Street, and a face looked out and decided this was not their business, and drove on. Bystanders. A town full of them. Every one of them with a reason. Every one of them later with the video on their phone having to live with the fact that they had driven on. And then, at 3:09 in the afternoon, a rental sedan that did not belong to anyone in that town turned off 4th Street into the lot too fast and stopped at an angle across 2 spaces, and the door opened. The man who got out was in uniform. Not a costume of one. The real thing. The Army service uniform, dark every line of it, earned the jacket front a small grave city of ribbons and badges, and on his head, set the way a man sets a thing he has bled for, a green beret. He was tall, and he moved the way a certain kind of soldier moves, unhurried, economical, taking up exactly as much space as he chose, and no more. He left the car door open. He did not look at the flatbed, or the officers, or the boy with the phone. He looked at one thing in that whole lot. He looked at his mother sitting in a folding chair on the cold concrete, with her papers drying around her, and her cane on the ground. And the boy's video catches the exact moment Major Andres Tillman's face does the thing a soldier's face is trained never to do, which is to break, just for a quarter of a second, before he puts it back together and walks. Roy Pittman on the steps saw a black man in an army uniform and made the same arithmetic he made about everyone, and got, for once in his life, the answer catastrophically wrong. "Sir," he called out in the bored voice of authority, "I'm going to need you to move that vehicle. You can't block the—" Andres did not stop walking, and did not raise his voice, and did not look at him.
Mama?
He said.
Are you hurt?
My hip's bruised, Marina said. My dignity's bruised worse. I'm all right, baby. I'm all right. He reached her and went down on one knee on the cold walk in his dress uniform in front of the whole department, and he picked up her cane and put it in her hand, and he gathered the papers off the wet concrete 1 page at a time, careful, the inspection record with the boot print on it last. And he stacked them, and he squared the edges the way his father had taught him. A man squares the edges. And he set them in her lap. Then he stood and turned around. "Which one of you put my mother on the ground?" Nobody answered. That is the first thing that happens to men like Pittman when the arithmetic flips. The words leave them. I'm not going to ask twice. His voice was not loud. That was the terrible thing about it. It was the voice of a man who had given orders that men obeyed in places where disobeying got you killed, and it carried across that lot like a flat stone across still water. There's a young man over there with a phone that's been running for 40 minutes. There's a recorder going on those papers. I can see the light. So whatever you tell me, I'll be checking it against the tape. Which one of you put your hands on a 68-year-old woman?
Sir, Grist started. "You need to calm down and—" "I'm the calmest man in this parking lot, Sergeant." He read Grist's name off his chest. Sergeant Grist. I'm going to remember that. Now I asked a question, and Pittman, because he could not help himself, because the pushing was always the point, came down one step and said the thing that ended him. I did. She was obstructing a municipal facility and resisting, and I'll tell you what I told her. Nobody's coming to make a federal case out of a trespass soldier. So you can take your mama and your fancy hat and— It's a beret, Andre said, and it's not about the hat. He took out his phone. He did not dial 911. He did not call a lawyer. He pulled up a contact and he pressed it, and he set the phone on speaker and he held it up in the cold air so it would carry, and the lot went quiet to listen. And the line rang once, twice, and a voice came out of that small speaker and filled the whole parking lot. A voice that several of the officers in that doorway recognized instantly, because they had seen the man it belonged to on the television not 2 weeks before, cutting a ribbon at the new veterans wing of the state hospital. Andres, the voice said, warm, familiar, the easy warmth of real friendship. You're back stateside. You said you'd call when you— General, Andre said, and the word landed in that parking lot like the first drop of a storm, because it was not a courtesy and it was not a nickname. It was the title of the man on the other end, a retired 3-star who now ran the state's Department of Veterans Affairs and who answered directly on personal terms to one office above him. I'm sorry to call you like this off a parking lot. I drove home to surprise my mother. I found her on the ground outside the city police station. An officer pushed her down. They've towed her car off a legal meter and impounded the community bus she uses to keep poor kids off a road where one of them already got hit. There are 2 recordings. I need this to be looked at by someone who can't be made to look away. A silence on the line. Then the voice, no longer warm, said, Is your mother safe right now? Is she hurt? Bruised? Cold? Sitting in a folding chair, an officer brought her against orders. The officer's name is Dabney. Write that down on the right side of the ledger. It's written. Andres put me on with whoever's in charge there, and Andres Tillman turned and held the phone out toward the steps toward Roy Pittman and said, He'd like a word. What happened over the next 90 seconds you could not have scripted, and I am not going to pretend each piece came faster than it did, because the slowness was the point. The way each thing landed and sat before the next thing came. First, Pittman did not take the phone. He stood on his step and stared at it the way a man stares at a snake, and the voice from the speaker said into the silence, Lieutenant, I can hear you breathing. This is the State Director of Veterans Affairs. In about 4 minutes, I'm going to be on the phone with the city manager who signs your checks, and the State Attorney General's Public Integrity Unit. And when I am, the first question is going to be whether you de-escalated or whether you made it worse. So this is the one chance you get to have made it better. Help the woman up. Get her car back. Now. And here came the separation beat, the first of them, and it was this. Pittman looked down at his own boot, the right one, the one that had been on the inspection record, and there was still a smear of wet paper pulp on the toe of it, and he scraped it once against the back of his other pant leg. An unthinking thing, a small, ugly tell, the boot trying to clean itself of the thing it had done. Nobody told him to. He did not know he did it. The boy's camera caught it. And then the lot was so still that you could hear from somewhere down 4th Street a school bell let out. The ordinary 3 o'clock bell of the elementary school. The bell that meant 31 children were lining up for a bus that was not coming. And the sound of it crossed the lot and landed on every adult standing there. Second Pittman, instead of helping her up, made the last bad choice of his career. He reached for the authority he had left. Sir, with respect, you don't have jurisdiction over a municipal— I don't. the voice agreed. But the Attorney General does, and the press does, and the voters do, and your city manager surely does. You're confusing jurisdiction with consequence. Different things. You're about to learn the difference. Separation beat the second. Grist, the sergeant, sat down. Not dramatically. He just walked 3 steps to the low brick wall by the steps and lowered himself onto it and put his hands on his knees and looked at the ground. A heavy man whose legs had stopped agreeing to hold up the weight of what was coming. And the flatbed driver, who had no stake in any of it and only wanted to be paid and gone, killed his engine, and the diesel rattle that had been the soundtrack of the whole afternoon cut off. And into the new quiet, a dog barked twice somewhere behind the houses across the road and stopped. Third, Brenna Dabney came down off the step. She walked past Pittman without looking at him, which a probationary officer does not do to a lieutenant, not ever. And she went to Marina, and she crouched, and she got an arm behind the old woman's back, and she said, "Let's get you up, ma'am. Slow." And she lifted, and Marina rose out of the folding chair with the young woman's arm under her. The inspection record and the donation letter and 2 years of mileage logs clutched to her chest, and she stood. On her own cane, with a young officer's hand at her back in front of her son, Marina Tillman stood up. Separation beat the third. Andres watched his mother come up off that chair, and his free hand, the one not holding the phone, opened and closed once at his side. Just once. A man absorbing a thing too large to hold. And he turned his face away toward the road for a moment, toward the highway he had driven down, and the wind moved the flag on its pole above the station, so the rope slapped the metal twice. Tink, tink. The small, bright sound of a flag in a cold wind, and that was the only sound, while a soldier got his face back under control. Fourth. The voice on the phone, which had been waiting, said, "Lieutenant, last time. The car." And Roy Pittman finally understood. You could see it arrive. Not remorse, he did not have the equipment for remorse, but comprehension. The dawning animal understanding that the math had flipped all the way over, that the woman he had decided cost nothing had cost him everything. That the rope he had watched her throw into the flood had been caught by a hand, attached to an arm, attached to a uniform, attached to a phone call, attached to the whole structure of consequence he had spent his career standing safely behind. He had stood behind the system his entire life. He had never once imagined it could turn around and look at him. "Put the car down," Pittman said to the flatbed driver. His voice had gone to gravel. "Already strapped, I gotta." "Put the car down." The hydraulics whined in reverse. The sedan came back to earth. Separation beat the fourth and last, and it belonged to Marina. She did not gloat. She did not say a word to Pittman at all. She turned to the young man across the lot, to Domingo, who was still filming, whose arm must have been screaming after 51 minutes held up, and she said, "Baby, you can put it down now. You did real good. Your uncle would be proud." And Domingo lowered the phone, and his face crumpled, the way a brave young person's face crumples only after the danger is past. And he wiped it hard with the back of his wrist and said, "Yes, ma'am." And the recording on his phone ends there, with those 2 words, 51 minutes and 9 seconds long, the most watched thing that town would ever produce. The voice on the speaker said, gentle now, "Andres, I've got the city manager on the other line. Take your mother home. We'll handle the rest from here. And son, welcome back." "Thank you, sir," Andres said, and ended the call and put the phone away and went to his mother, and the cascade of consequence that the next weeks would bring had already begun. But for that one moment in the parking lot, there was nothing official, nothing systemic, no justice with a capital letter. There was a son who took the folders from his mother's arms so her hands would be free, and put his arm around her, careful of the bruised hip,
and walked her slow toward the rental car with the door still open and the pralines on the dash. And she stopped halfway and looked back, not at Pittman, but at the young officer standing alone now in the middle of the lot.
"Brenna Dabney," Marina called. "You come by the church Thursday, 3 o'clock. I'll have the bus." She said it like it was already settled, the bus already back, the future already arranged, because a woman who has run a classroom for 40 years knows that the surest way to make a thing true is to say it out loud to the right person in front of witnesses.
There's children need to learn that a uniform can mean the other thing too. You're going to help me teach them.
And Brenna Dabney, standing in a parking lot where she had just ended her own probationary career, as far as she knew, said,
"Yes, ma'am. 3 o'clock.
She did not lose her career. But she did not know that yet. And that not knowing, that willingness to do the right thing, while certain it would cost her everything, is the whole measure of her. And you should hold it against the memory of the 3 officers who stood in that doorway and did the math and stayed warm. Now, the dominoes. I will give them to you the way they fell, because they fell exactly one into the next, and each one was a specific moment and not a summary. The first fell that same evening. The boy's video, 51 minutes and 9 seconds, went up at 6:40 p.m. By midnight, it had been watched 200,000 times. By the next midnight, 4 million. The 3 words, "because we can," spoken by Sergeant Grist over the towing of a legally parked car became the caption on the whole thing. You have probably guessed by now that this is how these things travel. The boot on the inspection record, the folding chair, the green beret turning the corner, the phone held up in the cold. People who had driven past on 4th Street and decided it was not their business watched it on their couches and had to sit with what they had driven past. The second fell within 72 hours. Roy Pittman and Curtis Grist were placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The phrasing was careful and bureaucratic and meant nothing yet, but it was the first time the building had ever moved against either man. And inside the building, the people who had spent years feeding complaints into a drawer understood that the drawer had finally been opened from the outside. The third was the drawer itself. The Public Integrity Unit subpoenaed the citizen complaints, and there they were, going gray. Domingo Cruz's uncle and his appliance van, the chicken plant family, and the car that was towed 8 months before their daughter walked the road in the dark and got hit. 4 others Marina never met. And the last one, the one I told you I was saving. The last complaint in the drawer had been filed 2 years and 3 months earlier by a woman who had since moved away on behalf of her son, a boy of 14 who had been walking home from the same elementary school and had been stopped by Lieutenant Roy Pittman and made to empty his backpack onto the wet ground and pick it all up while Pittman watched for nothing for walking, and the boy had come home and not spoken for 2 days. The complaint had been filed and buried like the rest, and the boy's name on the complaint was Eli Cruz, Domingo's little cousin, the nephew of the man whose van was taken. The same family, twice, 3 times fed into the same machine by the same man. And it was this, the documented, dated, drawer-buried proof that Roy Pittman had been doing this for years to the same families, and that the building had known and filed it away, that turned the whole thing from one bad afternoon into what the Attorney General's office would call, in the language of the indictment, a pattern. That was the connection that broke it open, not the shove. The shove was just the day the wrong woman's son came home. It was the pattern under the shove, the years of it, the drawer full of it, that did the real damage. And it did the damage because a 19-year-old who could not feed himself had held up a phone for 51 minutes, and an old teacher on a folding chair had told a frightened officer to stand where the camera could see her face. The 4th domino. Grist took a plea and a pension forfeiture rather than face the pattern in court, and his 3 words went with him, the way Marina had told a frightened officer that a name follows a person. Because we can forever, now, the first thing anyone would ever find about Curtis Grist for the rest of his life. The fifth. Roy Pittman was indicted on charges relating to the pattern of false citations, the abuse of the impound process against specific families, and the assault on the steps. I am not going to tell you he went to prison for 20 years, because that is not how it usually goes, and this story does not lie to you about how it usually goes. I am going to tell you he never wore a uniform again, that the city settled with the families he had ground down, that the chicken plant family's daughter, the one who had to learn to use her left hand again, sat in the gallery at his arraignment, in the front row, in a wheelchair she still sometimes needed. And that when the charges were read aloud, Roy Pittman, who had said, "Nobody's coming," 4 times to an old woman on a cold sidewalk, looked back over his shoulder at a courtroom full of the people he had spent years making small. All of them. Come. Every one of them. Come. And he understood, at last, far too late to do him any good, that he had been wrong about the most important thing a man can be wrong about. People come. People always come. The only question is whether they come for you or for the ones you stepped on. The sixth and last domino was the building itself. The chief retired early, the careful retirement of a man getting out before the audit reaches his floor. A consent decree came down, and among its requirements, written in by a state director of Veterans Affairs who had taken a personal interest, was that the department's new training on use of force and citizen interaction be designed in consultation with community members, and that the first such consultant on the contract, paid a modest and appropriate fee, was a retired second-grade teacher who knew more about how power talks to the powerless than anyone in that building had ever bothered to learn. Now the other side of it, the rise that ran alongside the fall. Because a story that only watches the wicked come down is only half a story, and the lesser half. The bus came back. It was back in the church lot within a week. The impound fees waived. A new inspection, done for free by a shop 2 towns over, that heard the story and would not take her money. On the Thursday Marina had named 3 o'clock, she was behind the wheel of it, and 31 children climbed up the steps, and at the bottom of the steps, in a department windbreaker rather than her uniform, because she was off duty and had chosen to come anyway, stood Officer Brenna Dabney, helping the little ones up, learning their middle names because Marina made her, because Marina believed children should know that a uniform could mean the other thing too, and the only way to teach it was to show it. Dabney did not lose her job. The video had made her in the same 48 hours the most defensible employee in the building, the one officer on camera doing right, and the consent decree named her by implication as the model of the thing they were now required to become. She was promoted within the year, the risk-taker rewarded appropriately and not extravagantly, a sergeant's stripes and a transfer to community liaison, which is a fancy way of saying her whole job became standing at the bottom of bus steps learning children's names. Domingo Cruz finished the semester he had nearly dropped and started a program at the community college in broadcast journalism because a man told him, a major in a green beret who took him to lunch before shipping back out, that a person who could hold a camera steady for 51 minutes while his hands shook had a particular kind of courage the world was short of and should not waste. His uncle did not get the van back. Some things the system takes, it does not return. But the settlement bought a better one, and the uncle moved home 2 counties closer, close enough for Sunday dinner. The chicken plant family's daughter walks now without the chair most days. She testified. She is 20, and she is studying to be a paralegal, which she decided sitting in that gallery, watching what paper in the right hands could do. Eli Cruz, the boy who emptied his backpack on the wet ground and did not speak for 2 days, is 16 now and on Marina's list, sort of too old for the afterbell,
But he comes anyway on Thursdays to help her carry the food down to the basement, and she lets him because she understands that some children need to be needed more than they need to be helped.
And the 3 officers who stood in the doorway and did the math and stayed warm.
2 of them quietly resigned during the investigation. The 3rd is still there, transferred to a desk, and on the days the after-bell bus passes the station, he does not look up from his paperwork. And that is its own kind of sentence. The small, daily sentence of a man who chose the warm doorway and has to keep choosing the warmth of it every day for the rest of his career, watching the bus go by.
Roy Pittman moved away after the case settled.
The town does not say his name. When they tell the story, and they tell it often, he is just the lieutenant, the way you refer to a thing you have decided not to feed by speaking it. His wife stayed in town with the kids and went back to her own name, and that one sentence is all the ripple I will give his family. Because they did not do it, and they have to live near it. And that is enough.
As for Andres, his leave was 3 weeks. He spent the first 2 of them on his mother's porch and in the basement of Greater Hope. And the children who had been told their whole short lives about a man who lived far away and did important things met him and found out he could fix the bus's brakes himself, and could not for the life of him braid a small girl's hair, no matter how the small girl coached him. He shipped back out at the end of the month, but he writes more now, and his mother writes back, and she tells him these days when things go wrong, the small things, the leaky faucet, and the bus's bad starter, and the price of everything, because a thing changed on that cold sidewalk between the 2 of them. An old, unspoken arrangement. And what changed was this. She had believed for 11 years that the way to love him was to carry everything alone, so he would never have to set down his own heavy load to pick up hers. And he had needed it. Turned out, the opposite. He had needed to be asked. He had needed to know that if the sky fell, she would throw the rope. She throws it now, not for emergencies, for ordinary things. Andres, the starter's going again. What do I do? And he writes back the answer, and at the bottom of every letter, where another man might write something grand, he writes the same 2 words, the words that came out of a small speaker into a cold parking lot and turned the whole afternoon. The promise. Underneath the promise. I'm coming. On Thursdays, Marina drives the bus. She catches the folding door with her hand at the top of its swing so it will not slam. An old habit. The same gentleness she has shown every door and every child and every fern her whole long life. The children pile on. Brenna Dabney calls the roll. The bus pulls out past the station, where it all happened, past the man at the desk who does not look up, down 4th Street and across the state road where no child of hers has ever had to walk in the dark, and no child of hers ever will. And Marina drives them all home. Nobody walks. Somebody came. Marina spent 11 years believing love meant carrying every weight alone, so the people she loved would never have to set theirs down. Have you ever done that? Decided someone you love is too burdened to hear that you're struggling, and so you went quiet? Here's the harder question. Who in your life is waiting right now for you to finally throw the rope, certain you'll handle it alone the way you always have, when all they ever wanted was to be asked? Tell me in the comments about the time you asked for help and someone came. If this story moved you, subscribe and share it with one person who needs to hear that somebody will come. We tell these stories so the right ones get remembered.